Hello, I'm Chuck Martin, and welcome to the Voices of the Internet of Things. With me today is Mick Kowitz, CEO of RYSE Aero Technologies. Mick has been co-founder and chief technology officer of MobileVoice Control, chief technology officer and co-founder of ClinGenuity, and president and CEO of MacawHealth. At RYSE, Mick is focused on electrified air mobility using advanced artificial intelligence in the development of electrical vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. Welcome here, Mick. Great to see you.
Hi, Chuck. Nice to be with you.
So, with your background in AI and so many startups and running so many companies, why are you doing this?
Well, it's kind of a passion project to some degree, as I think most people in the space are, because to undertake, the ability to fly and fly electrically, I think you have to have a little something, where you have a passion for it. It's different than just building software systems. Of course, coming out of artificial intelligence and natural language processing, in the healthcare world where you're dealing with lives and you've got to make sure that you're protecting the patient's rights. It's kind of similar. I also happen to be a private pilot, so that factors into it. I've been flying since I was 15, and so that obviously has a big part of it. But really, I've been involved in several projects that have been close to this, and this was one where I thought with the venture capital firm we're working with, this had real legs.
And so you're a pilot, you've flown like regular planes, and what you created is a smaller version of that. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so to become a private pilot or somebody who just flies a regular everyday aircraft, it takes a lot of effort. The skill set is deep and wide. You have to have a lot of troubleshooting skills. Aircraft that have airworthiness certificates are really very complex from the perspective of having what their MEL and their CEL, all the different airworthiness protectives that are out there that the FAA formulates. With this, we're really an ultralight aircraft. And what we wanted to do was make it possible for anyone to fly without a pilot's license. Some of the other players in the market are doing, personal aircraft, but they're going to fall under Part 91, where you're going to have to be a pilot to fly those. This, you do not have to be a pilot. It has its limitations. It can't weigh too much, has to be single occupant. Don't fly it over congested areas. And really the limitation is speed. Don't fly it faster than 63 miles an hour. In fact, it's limited at that. And that really is the criteria which allows you, I could teach you in 15 minutes to fly this aircraft.
First, describe your aircraft. I know what it looks like, but describe it for the audience if you would.
Yeah, so it's called the Recon, the RYSE Recon. It actually can land and take off in water. It is a 6 independent propulsion module system, open cockpit with 2 joystick control. Like I said, it takes off and lands in water, and it has removable rechargeable batteries as well. So the vehicle's designed very simplistic, like an Ego lawnmower, but with 6 independent propulsion modules that are away from the operator. Many configurations have the battery underneath where the operator sits. This has the batteries disjointed, distributed, if you will, out at each pod. They each have their own battery management system and their own speed controller. We do have redundant flight control systems and redundant tertiary redundancy level of communications across all the pods. But if one pod stops working, completely disconnected from everything else, the vehicle continues to fly safely and you'll land safely. If the battery stops working in one of those pods, all 6 motors will continue to work, because not only are they distributed, but they're also tied together. And so that they can help that pod actually continue to fly. So we've really built a level of redundancy that means if everything goes out, you're not going to just fall out of the sky. It'll safely get you to the ground no matter what.
So how does it land in water? Is it like a boat?
So each outrigger, each of the 6 propulsion modules has a float. And so it has an outrigger float. And then underneath the operator is actually an air float. And so that is enough dissipation of water in order to be able to keep you from sinking. You can go in and land. We actually have a video coming out that is going to allow you to be able to see it actually land and take off in water. Pretty cool video, actually.
So what do you see as the use of this? Like, who do you see using it? I know you've got a lot of pre-orders, and what do you see them using it for?
Our target market, really, when we started building this, we thought we want to pick a market to begin with that has a meaningful purpose to using the vehicle. And so we started going to farm shows. We saw agriculture as a very good first entry. Why? Well, for a couple of reasons. From the sales perspective, you have the owner, the operator, and the check signer all in one is the person who buys it. Agricultural people, they have adopted technology earlier than almost anybody. They were first to use stitched imagery, first to use GPS satellite, first to use drones, first to use autonomous vehicles. And what other industry touches every consumer in America 3 times a day? And so they're a great market. They spend $54 billion a year on agricultural large equipment. Your average farmer spends about $650,000 a year on farm equipment if they're more than 3,000 acres. That's a lot of people and a lot of opportunity. And they respect equipment. They understand safety and they understand how to use it.
So what would a farmer do with one of these?
Well, they can use it for multiple purposes. One, to be able to go as the crow flies and get across their fields where right now they have to drive zigzag around them. Crop scouting, to be able to get out to the center of an irrigation system instead of walking a mile. They can land right out there with the equipment, with the recon, and fix that equipment. To go fix fencing, to be able to identify troubled funguses in the early season when the crops are low and wet and you can't take a pickup truck or an ATV out. And in the dry season, when the crop's up to your shoulder, to be able to get out to trouble areas is troublesome for them. But then the secondary purpose is they don't only have to use this as a manned vehicle, they can actually apply for a heavy lift drone exception, a certificate of authorization from the FAA, and use this as a drone. If they do that in conjunction with Part 137, which allows them to spray, we actually have a 30-foot boom they can attach to the recon. They can fly it remote, put 25 gallons of fuel, 250 pounds of not fuel, of chemical in it, and they can spray pesticides, herbicides, whatever they want with very specific nozzles and get very precise spraying out of the vehicle.
It'd be like the John Deere in the sky.
It's kind of the idea. When you add in that second component of being able to make it do what the smaller drones can handle about 10 gallons, but their bigger problem is if they're carrying that 10 gallons, they don't have much time. So they can spray about 2 acres an hour. We can spray over 12, 13 acres an hour with this vehicle and more, depending upon what you're spraying and what you're spraying for.
So are those the kind of people that you're seeing as that are pre-ordering these things, or are there individuals as well?
Yeah, it's a combination. Our actual first buyer is someone who wants to fly. His office is 1 mile across the lake from where he lives, but he has to drive 25 minutes around. He just wants to get to his office in 1 or 2 minutes. Saves him 50 minutes a day, really, in order to do it. There are a lot of those people. There are people who want to use it as part of their business to be able to look over their properties, personal security. We're talking with the military as well for a number of manned and unmanned projects. So a lot of different opportunities in a lot of different spaces. National Park Services, emergency response. Because you don't have to be a pilot to operate it, it really has some benefits as a lightweight vehicle.
So it sounds like this is not really like the ultralight category. Typically, hang gliders and so forth is kind of a hobbyist thing. This sounds like it's practical transportation, but versus hobbyist.
Well, I mean, it certainly can be hobbyist. It still fits within the spirit of that. We think a lot of people, and we have a fair amount of people who live on lakefronts and have large property who just wanted to tool around. I think even the farmer who buys it's going to use it for more than just surveying his crops. He's going to use it primarily, I think, as part of just his daily life, which is part of the spirit of the sport and recreational use of it.
Now, you've flown this at actually events, and you've had kind of strangers fly this thing as well, like at CES, at the farm. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we've been developing aircraft in the air taxi space since 2015. So our team of engineers have been doing this probably longer than almost anyone. We actually probably were the first group to get a special airworthiness certificate long before Joby or anybody else. And so we've been doing it for a long time. So our controls and the ability to understand how to build a system that other people can fly was probably a little bit shorter of a learning curve than what a lot of these other companies are. And so being able to build this and quickly get it to market in less than 3 years has been a pretty amazing feat. Doing it within the ultralight space, you want to be as safe as possible. So we made sure we flew it a lot before anybody else flew it. And so we have taken it to trade shows, but we have let other people fly it. We've let a lot of other people. We just had a a reporter last week, or not last week, I guess about 3 weeks ago, but it was just in the Rob report last week, where he actually came and flew it. And we've had several reporters fly it. My wife has flown it. So a lot of people have flown it and flown it for pretty good clips. Most people just taxi mode, but some people have taken it and they've gone out into cruise and loiter mode as well. So yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of people operate it and operate it safely.
And what's typically the reaction when someone flies it, especially someone who doesn't have a pilot's license?
Well, it's kind of funny because, I spend about 15 minutes teaching them, and probably the bulk of that 15 minutes after you explain the controls, I have them sit in it, learn the controls, is really talking about what to do if something goes wrong. And, emergency procedures in all aircraft are always going to be the primary. You want to make sure you know what to do in case something happens you don't expect, so that there is no unexpected. That's the idea of flying any aircraft. And we spend the majority of the time talking about if a motor goes out, if you get an audible message to X, if your screen starts flashing red, what do you do? Beyond that, it's really, this is forward, this is backwards, this is side to side, and there's a thumb wheel that lets you spin around. The left stick is up and down. If you just let go, if you get scared at any time, take your hands off the stick. You're just going to hover. Just like any drone, it's going to stay right where you're at. And so giving people that comfort level before they fly is fantastic. So after they get in the air and I'm on the phone with them, talking to them, I walk them through. I say, start giving ease into the control, get a feel for it. Okay, give it a little more. Okay, ease out of the controls. That's usually the conversation. I make them go through every direction. And then when I'm done, I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? And they can go left and right, back and forth as hard as they want. It's not going to fall out of the sky. And if they pull all the way back on the stick, it's just going to land nice and easy. If they try to go all the way forward, we've geofenced it. They're not going up too high. So we really control where they're at with it. So when they land, after they've flown around for 5-10 minutes, I usually walk over and say, what do you think? And the response is usually, I'm speechless. That was so cool. And that's really the experience we want from people. But we want them to also walk away with, I can see a lot of use cases for this, not just flying me from my house into the city. We think that's a use case that's further out. We think flying it on your farm, flying it on your large property, flying it at your lake house, flying it at out of the ski resort, or an area outside of a national park is probably the bigger and better and more constrained use case for this.
I would think it's going to be a conversation piece when people start to see these showing up in their neighborhood.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's really going to be neighborhoods as much as you're going to be driving along the highway and you're going to see it zooming down along the highway on somebody's property. They're going to check out their irrigation tile, or they're going to check out the fence, or maybe searching for some lost cattle. That's really where we think the use case is really going to develop quickly. We think a lot of people see it being in the backyard. That's going to be further out. I mean, even the air taxi guys are telling you that.
I want to go fly one of these things.
Yeah, well, come to my office. You're more than welcome to fly it.
Love it. So how do you see the market overall? I know you've been looking at the entire market because you look at air taxis early on. Tell me how you see it, the whole thing evolving over time.
I really do believe this is an entry point. For us, we think we're going to be years ahead of everybody else with tons of vehicles in the market, hundreds, if not 1,000 vehicles in the market, because they're expensive right now, and the costs are going to drive down. So we're going to have that personal vehicle experience as an ultralight, fitting in the ultralight space pretty early on. But this is a platform. So using it as a drone, using it in military, I think is a huge application that we see. But I think realistically, when you talk about the consumer market, I really do believe that in 10 years from now, the consumer market's going to develop significantly. I think propulsion is going to grow. It's going to change. I think your batteries are going to grow. They're going to change. The air taxi market, it's going to start off more like your helicopter charter service. There's already companies doing that right now, and in New York City and all over the country. That's where I think air taxi is going to start over the next few years. I do think it's going to expand as the costs come down and the NAS, the National Airspace, gets more developed. There are several companies working with the FAA on that. It's not an easy lift. Where the air taxi market wants to go is they want to go to an unmanned aircraft. You and 5 of your friends hop in at Newark at Liberty and you fly into the city and you land on top or near, World Trade Center 1. And you hop out and you go to work. That's what they want with no operator in it at all. I don't think that's till 2040. I think a manned version of that in 2030 is going to happen. Are there going to be a lot of them? Not initially. But I think that market is actually a less attainable market really than the personal market. The guy who can hop in it and fly it, pull it out of his garage, take off, and fly 20 minutes to his office, not in New York City, but in the suburbs. I think that's really the bigger use case. That guy's going to want to be able to land it in his parking lot, just like we've started to see EV charging stations pop up in parking lots. I think you're going to see a pad pop up where you can land your vehicle and then wheel it off to the side into a parking space so the next guy can come in and land his vehicle in your more suburban areas. I think that's really the bigger market. And I think that's what we're playing into. We believe that's going to be the big market.
Where do you see this other market of the single passenger certified vehicle?
I think it fits into the same market. I think, but so there's going to have to be some changes. Like for that single operator or two-person operator vehicle, you need a pilot's license to do that right now. And I think, whether you go under Part 61 or 141 to go get your pilot's license, I don't think a lot of people are going to do that. I think there's a reason why general aviation has N number of pilots. And I'm a proponent. I'm working with a flight school that we're trying to get the local high school involved and get more kids into aviation. And I think that's a huge factor in all this. But I think the guy who's got his full-time job, who's, already making $150,000, $250,000 a year, to take the time to do that flight, I think there's a limited number of people who want to do that. So we do have to get to more of this autonomous and this, what the FAA terms SVO, simplified vehicle operator market. And we're already there because we can already give it to you. But the FAA has got to get there when you talk about a heavier aircraft with multiple people hopping in it and flying over congested areas. That's a different game. When you're a single occupant in a aircraft that you're responsible for and it's lightweight and really the only person you're going to injure is you, that's a risk you take on, and that's what Part 103 was designed for. When you start getting into Part 91 and Part 135, you're talking about heavier vehicles and a much riskier, it's got to be locked down safe, and that operator has got to really know what they're doing.
So you're a pilot, so you understand restricted airspace and all the circles and everything on your maps. The normal person who doesn't have a pilot's license may not be aware of that. Is that going to be an issue or not?
Well, I think a lot of the systems, our system, for example, shows you airspace. We're a little more isolated in our sale. So when we go to a farm, that guy's typically using it on his farm and within some 10-mile radius. And so that 10-mile radius is pretty easy to say, hey, this is here and you're in airspace here, you're not here. If you want to go there, you got to call ATC, air traffic control, before you hop in it. So it's pretty easy. When you start opening up and you're flying in cities and you're going to let people fly multiple directions at longer ranges, you're going to have to really have a good NAS system. Right now, your drones, and we use the same technology, can say, hey, you can't fly there. You're not allowed to fly there. Those guys are going to have the ability to understand how to fly in that airspace. And again, I think there's going to be some new airspace rules, more VFR corridors for people to fly through. I don't know what it looks like, but it's a pretty heavy lift. It's not, everybody just says, yeah, we're going to do that. That's a big lift for the FAA, and they're going to want to do it right. They've done a great job in protecting us and protecting people who don't fly from getting hit. Rarely do you hear of an accident where people on the ground are injured, right? Because we're all trained on how to work around that. That level of training, if that goes away, what's the vehicle doing? So there's some complications that the FAA and AOPA, everybody's got to work through together to get through. That's not going to be sleight of hand.
So does your technology have the capability for, hypothetically, someone has a 10-acre farm and they say, I want one of these vehicles, but please lock it in so I can't go outside the thing won't go outside the 10 acres?
Yes, we have geofencing capability. We geofence for perimeter and we can geofence for altitude as well.
I would think that'd be a big selling point.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. So when you're flying, when you're using our vehicles, a heavy lift drone, you have to lock that down. That's how you get the certificate of authorization. When we do go around the country and do like demo flights where we let you fly it, we put it in what we call bumper car mode, which is test drive mode, where if you try to go up, you can go up, but at some point you can't go any higher. If you try to go forward, you're going to hit, and it's not going to let you go. You're going to have to turn it back around.
I would think that's a very good technology.
Yeah, they were actually doing that out here today earlier as well.
So what surprises you in all of this? Are you comfortable with where you are in terms of the space in the industry? You feel like you're ahead, behind, on schedule?
So for us, I think we're ahead of most people. Like I said, we flew 45 times at the Consumer Electronics Show this past year in front of over 40,000 people. We did not miss a flight. We flew every time, and we flew it for as much fun as you could have. We flew down the Las Vegas Strip. So we're the first aircraft to be allowed to fly down the Las Vegas Strip and the first aircraft to be able to fly at CES. And, it's because the vehicle is so safe. We demonstrated flying at farm shows all over the country and other events as well. And we put a lot of time on it to get there. So from that perspective, we're ahead of the market. What concerns me about the market is when people start talking about the use cases that are not realistic in today's terms, they're going to be years out. And we don't want to be associated with that. We've built a vehicle that we know we can fly today and fly safely today, but we put it in a box. Like, you're not going 2,000, 3,000 feet up. You're not flying it 130 miles an hour, 150 knots. It's a very controlled environment with a very specific use case, and we're training people very carefully on it. My concern is people are going to start trying to do things without being in controlled areas, and they could ruin it for everybody. And that's really the biggest concern I have, is people who just come on the scene and think they're going to do this. Now, ultralights are designed for that, right? The novice can build their own aircraft and fly it, and they're not hurting anybody. It's when people start talking about bigger use cases that aren't really viable today as if they are viable today. That concerns me.
So do you think the risk is a company being in that position or an individual being in that position?
Probably a little bit of both, right? I mean, I think, as a company, we're trying to protect our reputation, but we're also, very much trying to protect the individual who's taking this thing out. The one thing we've done is we've said, if anybody in my office can raise their hand, go through, we have a whole check off for documents before we release anything. There's a whole set of inspection every time that thing goes out the door. And we're very careful to follow, procedures as if we were going through an airworthiness certification. I don't know what other people are doing, but our job is to protect anybody who goes in it, that if they crash it, it's because they did something stupid, not because the vehicle didn't operate as expected. And that's the biggest concern from my perspective. You can still do something stupid with this because you're mandated to fly it. So we don't have any, like, there are sensors, but we don't have sensors that are going to keep you from driving into a wall ahead of you, because an ultralight is designed not with any autopilot or any obstacle avoidance. That's what makes it an ultralight. It's see and avoid, just the same as a regular aircraft. So we take the thought that, it's gonna see power lines. No, there's no technology in it that's going to look for power lines. Your eyeballs need to it. You're liable for this as the owner operator of it.
You think people know about the liability? I have read Part 103, and it's very clear.
It is, and that's part of what we hold on to. I don't know if people generally know it, but we explain it. When you sign a purchase agreement, you're signing on and saying you understand the liability, and we are going to train you on all that. We're going to train you on airspace, on the emergency procedures, the safety procedures, inspection, maintenance, as well as listen, this is a deadly piece of equipment that you're operating. Yes, it's doing everything in its power to keep you safe, but it doesn't keep you from doing anything stupid. Look at ATVs. There are more ATV deaths annually than there are ultralight deaths annually. So it's all about training. Nobody's training heavily on an ATV, but ultralights, I think most people are getting heavy training on it. We want to continue with that.
So you crowdfunded this, or did you get outside investors?
We're VC invested, but right now we do have a Reg CF open that any individual can invest in for up to $5 million.
I would think people are excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are excited. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to be involved in something that's going to be, incredible at some point in time. That's our goal.
So a year from now, we're having this conversation. What do you think we'll be talking about?
I don't know that I think it's going to change a lot. I think it's going to be talking, probably the biggest thing is going to be how many are the people we're actually using, not we're going into production. Where are people going to be at with it? And I think that's going to be the big thing. I think for us, I think selling it as much as a drone for the farmer is going to probably be the sale as much as it is for people flying it manned. So I think that this is going to be an iterative reality. I think the demand is there, but I think when it comes down to it, flight is scary to a lot of people.
I think you'll be delivering these pretty soon, like in early next year.
Yeah, so our goal is by the end of March to be delivering them to the field.
Well, I look forward to driving down the road and seeing one of these things flying right by me. Thank you so much, Mick, and thank you all for listening to the Voices of the Internet of Things.